A blood-red sun hung low in the sky, casting its eerie glow over the crumbling remains of civilization. The streets were silent, save for the occasional shuffling of the undead. Cars sat abandoned, their windows shattered, their interiors soaked in dried blood. The smell of rot and death clung to the air like a curse. Ethan Cole crouched behind an overturned truck, his rifle steady in his hands. He scanned the street, his breath slow, measured. Beside him, Sam, a wiry man with sharp eyes, gripped a crowbar, while Rachel, a former paramedic, clutched a pistol with trembling fingers. Behind them, Jonah, an older man with graying hair, watched their backs. "Safe zone still 40 miles away," Jonah whispered. "But with this many rotters around, it might as well be 400. Ethan exhaled. They had heard rumors of a secure outpost, fortified, well-stocked, with armed guards keeping the dead at bay. It was a long shot, but long shots were all they had left. "We'll cut through the city," Ethan said. "Faster than sticking to the open roads. Less exposed." "More dangerous," Rachel muttered, checking the ammo in her pistol. 2 bullets. Ethan met her gaze. "We don't have a choice." A distant moan echoed through the ruins. The undead were stirring. They had to move. The descent into hell. The group moved quickly, slipping into the shadows of shattered buildings. The city was worse than they'd expected, cars stacked in chaotic wreckage, bodies sprawled in the streets, their faces frozen in horror. Then, they heard it. A scream. Rachel stiffened. "That's a person." Ethan gritted his teeth. The smart move was to ignore it. Stay quiet. Keep moving. But smart didn't always sit well with his conscience. "We check it out," he said. Jonah exhaled in frustration, but he followed. The group weaved through alleyways, the scent of decay thick in the air. They found the source of the scream in a collapsed storefront. A young woman, barely 20, was pinned beneath a fallen shelf, her face streaked with sweat. 3 zombies surrounded her. Ethan didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. One head exploded. Sam lunged forward, driving his crowbar into the skull of another. Rachel's hands shook as she fired at the third but missed. The zombie lunged. Jonah's knife caught it in the temple, driving deep. The creature crumpled. Rachel let out a shaky breath. The girl, eyes wide with terror, gasped. "Please, help me." Ethan and Sam lifted the heavy shelf, freeing her. "Name?" Ethan asked. "Emily," she panted. Thank you." "We have to move," Jonah growled. Gunshots draw them in. As if on cue, a chorus of moans rose in the distance. Nowhere left to run. They sprinted through the ruins, Emily struggling to keep up. The undead were closing in, too many to fight. The hospital. Sam pointed to a looming structure in the distance. "If we can get inside." "Go." Ethan barked. They reached the doors, but they were locked. Ethan slammed his shoulder against them. No use. The undead swarmed closer. Rachel fired a shot, taking down one. The rest kept coming. Jonah fumbled with his lockpicks. "Give me a damn second." They didn't have a second. "Emily, climb through." Ethan pointed at a shattered window. She hesitated, then scrambled through. Sam followed, helping Rachel in. Jonah cursed as he slipped inside. Ethan turned, just as a rotting hand grasped his jacket. A guttural growl filled his ears. He swung his rifle like a club, knocking the zombie back, but more were coming. A hand reached through the window, Sam's. "Come on." Ethan grabbed it, hauling himself inside as the first zombies slammed into the glass. They were safe, for now. But the hospital was dark. And something else was inside. Something worse than the undead. Darkness swallowed them as they pressed deeper into the hospital. Dust motes floated in the dim glow of Rachel's flashlight. The air was thick with the stench of rot and antiseptic, an unnatural stillness settling over the abandoned corridors. Ethan motioned for the group to stay quiet. The moans of the undead outside were fading, but that didn't mean they were safe. Rachel swallowed hard, her grip tightening on her pistol. Hospitals give me the creeps. Sam smirked. Good news. The world's already ended, nothing left to be afraid of. A distant clatter silenced them. Emily stiffened. That wasn't a zombie. Ethan agreed. The undead shuffled, moaned, mindless in their pursuit of flesh. But that sound had been deliberate. A movement. Someone, or something, was in here with them. A shadow in the dark. They crept through the hallways, past overturned gurneys and bloody smears on the walls. Some doors hung open, revealing operating rooms frozen in time. Others remained tightly shut, hiding whatever horrors lay within. Jonah held up a hand. Hold up. We need supplies, and hospitals have them. Ethan hesitated. Every second they spent here increased their chances of getting trapped. But food was low. Ammo even lower. All right. We sweep for meds, weapons, and anything useful. 10 minutes, tops. They split up, Rachel and Sam heading for what looked like a supply closet while Jonah and Emily checked an administrative office. Ethan took point, moving toward the emergency room. That's when he heard it. A breath. Not his. Not his team's. His rifle was up in an instant, aimed toward a doorway at the end of the hall. The silence was thick, pressing against his ears. Then, movement. A shadow slipping away. Ethan advanced. Show yourself, he ordered. Nothing. He took another step. A knife lashed out from the darkness. Ethan barely dodged, the blade slicing his sleeve. He twisted, striking back, his rifle butt slamming into the figure's ribs. A grunt. A shape staggered backward. A man. Dirty. Gaunt. Eyes wild. Stay back, the man hissed, brandishing the knife. His voice was raw, desperate. I don't want trouble. Ethan kept his rifle steady. Then you shouldn't have attacked me. A metallic click echoed from behind. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. More survivors. 2 of them, 1 woman, 1 man. Both armed. Both looking just as desperate as the first. Drop the gun, the woman ordered. Ethan didn't move. A scuffle broke out down the hall. Rachel screamed. A loud crash. Jonah's voice roared, "Run!" Chaos erupts. A deafening howl split the air. Then, the unmistakable sound of shuffling feet. The zombies had found a way in. Gunfire exploded as Rachel and Sam came barreling from the supply closet, a wave of undead on their heels. Move! Ethan barked. The rival survivors hesitated, then bolted. The undead didn't care who they fed on. Ethan sprinted down the hall, dodging a grasping hand as a zombie lunged from a doorway. He fired a shot, catching it in the skull, but the horde was relentless. Jonah and Emily burst from the office, their eyes wide with terror. We need an exit. Jonah shouted. Ethan spotted a stairwell sign. Upstairs. Go. They crashed through the door, slamming it behind them. The pounding of the undead followed, but for now, the barrier held. They raced up, their breaths ragged. 2nd floor. 3rd. The roof. The rival survivors were already there, panting. The woman, the one who had pointed a gun at Ethan, raised her hands. Truce? Ethan didn't answer. He was already scanning for an escape. Below, the hospital was swarming. They had minutes at best before the undead forced their way through. Rachel bent over, hands on her knees. Great plan, Ethan. Now what? Ethan's eyes landed on a fire escape. The metal ladder dangled just out of reach. We jump, he said. Emily's face drained of color. You're insane. Got a better idea? No one did. The first crash of bodies against the rooftop door sent a chill down Ethan's spine. They were out of time. The rooftop door buckled under the weight of the undead, each impact sending dust and debris falling from its rusted hinges. The pounding grew louder, more frenzied. The horde was coming. Ethan Cole didn't waste time. He sprinted toward the fire escape. The ladder dangled just out of reach, swaying slightly in the wind. Sam, boost me up. Ethan ordered. Sam cupped his hands, bracing himself. Ethan stepped into the makeshift foothold, pushing off with all his strength. His fingers brushed the cold steel of the ladder, missed. He hit the rooftop hard, pain jolting through his shoulder. Try again. Rachel yelled, her voice strained with panic. The rooftop door let out a tortured screech as its hinges started to give way. Ethan clenched his jaw and leaped again, this time grabbing the bottom rung. His muscles burned as he pulled himself up, quickly climbing until he reached the release mechanism. He yanked it hard. The ladder came crashing down. Go, go, go! Ethan shouted. Rachel was first, scrambling up the ladder as the door finally burst open. The undead poured out. Sam fired into the mass, taking down two, but there were too many. Move! Jonah bellowed, shoving Emily toward the ladder. She hesitated for half a second before climbing. The rival survivors weren't far behind. The woman, still nameless, shot Ethan a quick look before grabbing her companion and hauling him toward the escape. Sam went next. Then Jonah. The dead surged forward. Ethan was the last one on the ladder when a bony hand latched onto his ankle. A rotting face snarled up at him, blackened teeth snapping inches from his boot. Ethan gritted his teeth and kicked hard, sending the creature tumbling back into the swarm. He climbed faster, the fire escape shuddering beneath the weight of so many people. Then, crack! A bolt snapped. The ladder tilted. Jump, the woman yelled from above. Ethan didn't hesitate. He lunged for the edge of the adjacent building. His fingers caught the ledge, barely. His arms strained, his body dangling over the abyss. Below, the fire escape collapsed, taking a handful of zombies with it. Sam grabbed his wrist, pulling with all his strength. With one final heave, Ethan tumbled onto solid ground. They had made it. But now they were stranded. A dangerous proposal. The new rooftop was relatively safe, for the moment. The group collapsed in exhaustion, panting, coughing, covered in dust. Rachel wiped blood from her forehead. We can't keep doing this. We need to get out of this city before we're boxed in completely. Ethan nodded. Agreed. But we're low on supplies. The woman from the other group took a step forward, keeping her gun at her side but not lowering it. We have a safe house. Stocked. Not far from here. Sam scoffed. Oh, great. You hold us at gunpoint 1 second and now you want to play nice? Her companion, a thin, wiry man with a haunted look in his eyes, spoke up. You saved us. Least we can do is return the favor. Jonah crossed his arms. And what's the catch? The woman hesitated. We have a problem. Another group, dangerous people. They've been tracking us. They'll come for us soon. Ethan narrowed his eyes. How soon? Hours. Maybe less. A heavy silence settled over them. Rachel shook her head. We can't afford another fight. Ethan exhaled. If we help you, do we get supplies? The woman nodded. Ethan turned to his group. Then we don't have a choice. The calm before the storm. The walk to the safe house was tense. The woman, who introduced herself as Lisa, led the way, her partner Darren close beside her. Emily stuck close to Rachel, still shaken from the rooftop escape. Jonah walked near the back, eyes scanning for any threats. Lisa led them into a narrow alleyway, then through a rusted metal door, into an abandoned auto shop. The place was reinforced, barricaded windows, a locked storage room, and a stash of food, medicine, and ammo. Jonah let out a low whistle. Damn. This is better than I expected. Lisa locked the door behind them. It won't matter if the raiders find us. Ethan turned to her. How many? Lisa hesitated. 6, maybe 7. Armed. They take what they want, kill anyone who resists. Sam scowled. And you pissed them off? Darren sighed. They tried to force Lisa into their group. She shot one of them. Ethan studied Lisa. There was no fear in her eyes. Only determination. Then we don't have much time, Ethan said. He turned to the group. We set up an ambush. We make this fight ours. Jonah nodded. Damn right. Rachel checked her pistol. I have 1 bullet left. Lisa smirked. Don't worry. We have more. She tossed Rachel a full clip. Rachel caught it, then grinned. Okay. Now I like you. A noise outside made everyone freeze. A distant engine. Then, shouting. Ethan turned to Lisa. They're here. The distant roar of engines sent a jolt of tension through the auto shop. Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened as he exchanged a look with Lisa. They're early, she muttered. Rachel peeked through a crack in the boarded-up window. At least 6 of them. Armed. Looks like they've been living rough. Jonah sighed. So, what's the plan? Because I'd rather not get shot today. Ethan knelt, drawing rough lines in the dust-covered floor. We make them come inside. Bottleneck them. If we fight in the open, we're dead. Lisa nodded. There's a back entrance. We can use it to flank them if they get in. Sam loaded a shotgun he'd found in the stash. Guess we're making our last stand, huh? Ethan gave him a sharp look. Not if we do this right. A knock at the door. The sound of boots crunching gravel grew louder. Then, 3 sharp knocks on the metal garage door. A voice, deep and gruff, called out. Lisa. I know you're in there. Lisa's hands curled into fists. Ethan motioned for everyone to stay quiet. The voice continued, we don't have to do this the hard way. Just come out, give us your weapons, and maybe we let the rest of you live. Silence. A second man chuckled. Or don't. We'll just take everything once you're dead. Ethan could hear them shifting outside. They weren't going to wait much longer. He turned to Lisa and whispered, how many exits? Just the back door, she whispered back. Rachel tightened her grip on her pistol. We can't outrun them. No, Ethan said. We fight smart. Lisa glanced at Darren. You still got those Molotovs? Darren smirked. Oh yeah. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You didn't think to mention those earlier? Lisa shrugged. Didn't trust you yet. Jonah chuckled dryly. Fair enough. Ethan took a deep breath. All right. Let's make them regret coming here. The first shot. A loud clang echoed as someone outside slammed a metal pipe against the door. Last chance, the gruff voice called. Lisa didn't hesitate. She grabbed a Molotov, lit the rag, and hurled it at the window. The glass shattered as fire exploded outside. Shouts of surprise rang out. Then gunfire. Ethan ducked as bullets peppered the walls. "They're coming in," Sam shouted. The garage door rattled violently. A crowbar wedged into the gap, forcing it open inch by inch. Ethan aimed through the crack and fired. A scream followed. The attackers scattered, but one was quick. He shoved the door up and rushed in, gun raised. Jonah was faster. Boom. The shotgun blast sent the raider flying backward. "Move. Hold them at the door," Ethan barked. Rachel and Sam took positions behind an overturned workbench, firing in bursts. Darren threw another Molotov. Flames roared outside, blocking part of the entrance. The raiders hesitated, but their leader, a tall, scarred man in a tattered jacket, shouted, "Push in. Kill them all." More gunfire erupted. Lisa ducked behind a metal cabinet, reloading. "We're not gonna hold them forever." Ethan knew she was right. They needed an escape. Then he heard it. A sound worse than gunfire. A low, guttural moan. Rachel turned pale. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Jonah swore. "The gunfire. It's drawing them." Ethan ran to the window. His stomach dropped. The street was no longer empty. A horde was coming. Between monsters and men. The raiders saw them too. One of them cursed. "Shit. The dead are coming." Scarface, the leader, didn't flinch. He turned back to the shop. "Kill them now and take what we can." Ethan cursed under his breath. They had minutes. Maybe less. Gunfire erupted again, but the raiders were distracted, their focus split between the survivors and the approaching horde. Lisa grabbed Ethan's arm. "We need to get out now." Ethan scanned the room. The back door. It was their only chance. "Fall back," he ordered. Sam laid down cover fire as they sprinted for the exit. Darren threw his last Molotov, setting a raider ablaze. The man's screams were drowned out by the rising moans outside. Lisa shoved open the back door. The alley was clear, for now. One by one, they rushed through. Ethan was last, covering their retreat. Then. A blur of movement. Scarface. The raider leader lunged from the shadows, tackling Ethan to the ground. The impact knocked Ethan's rifle from his grip. Scarface straddled him, a knife flashing in his hand. "Should have just died easy." Ethan struggled, grabbing the man's wrist as the blade inched toward his throat. Then, crash. The boarded window near the garage shattered. A zombie tumbled through. Then another. Then dozens. Scarface hesitated for half a second. It was all Ethan needed. He twisted, throwing the raider off. Scarface stumbled, right into the waiting arms of the undead. His scream was drowned in a sea of snapping jaws. Ethan didn't look back. He bolted for the alley, slamming the door shut behind him. Lisa was already leading the group down the narrow passageway. Jonah glanced back. "Where now?" Ethan wiped blood from his lip, his chest heaving. "The safe zone," he said. No one argued. Behind them, the hospital burned. The screams of raiders and the guttural moans of the undead blended into a nightmarish symphony. The city was no longer just dangerous. It was a graveyard. And if they didn't move fast, they'd be buried in it. The group ran. The distant screams of the raiders faded behind them, swallowed by the growing moans of the undead. Smoke from the burning auto shop curled into the night sky, a beacon for every walker in the area. Ethan's heart pounded as he led them through the alleyways, his mind racing. They had survived, but the city was a death trap. If they didn't get out soon, they'd be picked off, by either the dead or the living. Lisa jogged beside him, breathing hard. "You said something about a safe zone?" Ethan nodded. "There's supposed to be one about 5 miles west. The military was holding out there." Jonah scoffed. "Was holding out?" Ethan shot him a look. "Only one way to find out." Rachel adjusted the straps on her backpack, glancing over her shoulder. "We're not alone." Ethan followed her gaze. Shadows moved in the distance, figures stumbling between wrecked cars and debris. The horde was still coming. "Keep moving," Ethan ordered. They stuck to the side streets, keeping low, avoiding open areas. The city was eerily quiet except for the occasional distant gunshot and the ever-present moans of the undead. Sam winced as he clutched his side. "Damn raiders got a lucky shot." "I'm fine, but I won't be running any marathons anytime soon." Emily frowned. "You need antibiotics." Lisa glanced at Darren. "We don't have much left, do we?" Darren shook his head. "Used most of it patching up Lisa last week." Ethan gritted his teeth. Another reason to get to the safe zone, if it even still existed. The bridge. After an hour of moving through the ruined city, they reached the river. A bridge stretched across, leading toward the western outskirts. Jonah frowned. "We crossing that?" "We don't have a choice," Ethan said. The bridge was littered with abandoned cars, some burned out husks, others still intact. Blood streaked the pavement, but there were no bodies. Lisa tensed. "Something's not right." Ethan raised a fist, signaling everyone to stop. Silence. Then a single walker stumbled from behind an SUV. Then another. Then dozens. The horde was already on the bridge. Emily cursed. "How the hell did they get there before us?" Sam exhaled sharply. "Does it matter? We need another way." Ethan scanned the area. The only other option was to swim, and that wasn't happening, not in freezing water filled with who knew what. He took a breath. "We go through them." Lisa gave him a skeptical look. "Through?" Ethan pointed to the abandoned cars. "If we move slow, stay low, we can weave through without drawing too much attention." Jonah muttered, "Or we get torn apart." "Stick close." "No noise," Ethan said. No one argued. A slow crawl through hell. They moved in a tight formation, crouching between cars, stepping carefully. Ethan led the way, eyes scanning for any sign of danger. The zombies shuffled aimlessly, groaning and twitching. One stumbled just feet away from Ethan, its milky eyes blank, its jaw slack. Ethan held his breath. The zombie sniffed the air but didn't react. Slowly, he motioned for the others to follow. They moved car by car, inching across the bridge. Rachel was right behind Ethan, her fingers gripping a knife so tightly her knuckles were white. Lisa and Darren stayed close together, their steps careful and measured. Sam gritted his teeth with every movement, his injury slowing him down. Jonah kept watch at the rear, his shotgun ready, but useless if they wanted to stay quiet. For a moment, it seemed like they would make it. Then a car alarm blared. Emily had bumped a rusted sedan, setting off its shrieking wail. The effect was immediate. The zombies froze, then turned. Ethan's stomach dropped. Run. The sprint for survival. The group bolted. The horde roared to life, surging forward, hungry and relentless. Sam stumbled. Jonah grabbed him, hauling him forward. Lisa and Darren pushed ahead, weaving through wreckage as the undead closed in. Ethan reached the halfway point when a zombie lunged from the side, grabbing Rachel's arm. She screamed. Ethan didn't hesitate. He swung his rifle like a club, cracking the creature's skull. It went down, but more were coming. Rachel's breath came in ragged gasps. Not how I wanted to die. Then don't, Ethan snapped. The end of the bridge was just ahead. Lisa reached it first, kicking aside a barricade. Move. One by one, they sprinted through. Sam nearly collapsed, his face pale. Emily helped him forward as Jonah slammed the barricade shut behind them. The zombies crashed into it, clawing, gnashing their teeth. But they couldn't get through. They had made it. Barely. The truth of the safe zone. Ethan turned. The safe zone was supposed to be just beyond the bridge. Instead, he saw ruins. The military outpost was gone. Barricades torn down. Fires long burned out. Bodies, dozens of them, littered the ground. A tattered sign hung from a pole. Safe zone evacuated. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Jonah let out a bitter laugh. Of course. Rachel shook her head. Then where do we go now? Ethan scanned the area, searching for anything, any hope. Then, in the distance, he saw movement. Not walkers. People. Armed. Watching them. Ethan exhaled. Their fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Ethan raised his rifle but didn't fire. The figures in the distance weren't moving like zombies. They stood tall, alert, watching. Lisa stepped up beside him. You think they're military? Maybe, Ethan said. Or another group like the Raiders. Sam, still wincing from his wound, muttered, either way, they're armed, and we're not in the best shape for a fight. The figures moved. There were 5 of them, stepping out from the ruined remains of the so-called safe zone. Their leader, a tall woman with dark skin and a sharp gaze, raised a hand. Stay where you are, she ordered. Ethan didn't lower his weapon. Not looking for trouble. She eyed them, then nodded. Neither are we. Lisa's jaw tightened. Who are you? The woman gestured to the others to hold position before stepping forward alone. Name's Captain Ramirez. We were stationed here before command pulled out. Jonah crossed his arms. So, what? They just left you behind? Ramirez's face darkened. Not exactly. Orders were to evacuate civilians first, but not everyone made it. We stayed behind to help the stragglers. Rachel looked around at the ruins. Doesn't look like that went well. Ramirez's gaze flickered with pain, but she ignored the remark. You're injured. We have medical supplies. She motioned toward Sam. If you want help, come with us. Ethan hesitated. They needed supplies. Sam wouldn't last without antibiotics. But walking into another unknown situation could get them all killed. Lisa whispered, we don't have a choice. Ethan exhaled. Lead the way. Into the lion's den. The group followed Ramirez and her people into the remains of the safe zone. It had clearly been a proper outpost once, sandbag barriers, makeshift guard towers, and tents now half buried in debris. There were more survivors inside, about a dozen, most of them civilians, malnourished and tired. A few carried weapons, likely scavenged. Ramirez led them to a medical tent, where a man in fatigues, probably a former medic, tended to the wounded. He immediately went to work on Sam, checking the wound. You're lucky. Bullet passed through. You'll need rest, but you'll live. Sam chuckled weakly. Guess I won't die today. Darren muttered, no guarantees. Ethan turned back to Ramirez. Why are you still here? You said the military pulled out. Ramirez sighed. They did. But we couldn't just leave people behind. We held out as long as we could. Then the food ran low. The ammo, too. Jonah leaned against a supply crate. So, what now? You just waiting to die? Ramirez's sharp gaze locked onto him. No. We've been working on an escape plan. Lisa crossed her arms. Escape where? Ramirez took a deep breath. There's a small military bunker about 15 miles from here. Underground. Secure. It's supposed to have supplies. Ethan frowned. Supposed to? We lost contact with it before the city fell. But if it's still intact, it could be our best shot at survival. Rachel exhaled. And you need help getting there. Ramirez nodded. You're survivors. You know how to fight. We help each other, we have a chance. The ticking clock. Ethan glanced at Lisa. At Jonah, Rachel, Sam. They were all exhausted. But staying here meant death. He turned back to Ramirez. When do we leave? She hesitated. That's the problem, she admitted. We sent a scout team earlier. Only one came back. Lisa tensed. What happened? Ramirez's face was grim. He said the roads are crawling with the undead. Not just walkers, something worse. Jonah frowned. Define worse. Ramirez looked at them, her voice low. The infected are changing. Silence. Ethan's pulse quickened. Changing how? Ramirez gestured toward a side tent. See for yourself. The group followed her inside. The stench of blood and rot hit them instantly. A man lay on a cot, his breathing ragged. His skin was gray, veins blackened like ink spreading through his body. His eyes flickered open, but they were different, glassy, predatory. The medic knelt beside him, injecting something into his arm. We've been trying to slow the infection. But it's not like the others. It's faster. Rachel backed away. You're saying there are fast zombies now? Ramirez's jaw clenched. Not just fast. Smarter. The scout who made it back, he said they hunted him. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. The undead were terrifying enough. If they were evolving. Lisa broke the silence. We can't stay here. Ramirez nodded. That's why we're leaving at dawn. One last night. The group spent the next few hours preparing. They were given what little supplies Ramirez's people could spare, ammo, water, food. Not much, but enough. Lisa sat by the fire, sharpening her knife. Ethan sat beside her. You trust them? She asked. Ethan stared into the flames. I don't trust anyone. She smirked. Smart. Jonah sat across from them, cleaning his shotgun. This bunker better be real. Otherwise, we're just walking into another death trap. Ethan nodded. We'll find out soon enough. A scream tore through the night. Everyone jumped up, grabbing weapons. Ramirez rushed toward the tent where the infected man had been. The medic was dead, his throat ripped out. The cot was empty. Rachel gasped. Where the hell did he go? Then, a growl. From the shadows, something moved. Not stumbling. Not slow. It lunged. Faster than anything they'd seen before. Ethan raised his rifle. And fired. The gunshot echoed through the ruined safe zone. Ethan's bullet struck the creature in the chest, but it didn't stop. It barely flinched. The infected man, if he could even be called that anymore, moved with terrifying speed, lunging toward Ramirez. She barely dodged, rolling to the ground as the creature's blackened claws tore through the air where her head had been. Kill it, she shouted. Lisa was already moving. She swung her machete, aiming for its neck. The blade connected, but not deep enough. The thing turned its soulless, glassy eyes on her. It smiled. Lisa recoiled. Oh, hell no. Jonah fired his shotgun. The blast hit the creature in the side, sending it staggering, but it didn't go down. Ethan didn't hesitate. He aimed for the head and pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through the infected skull, finally dropping it to the ground. Silence. Everyone stood frozen, staring at the unmoving corpse. Rachel's breathing was ragged. What the hell was that? Ramirez swallowed hard. That's what I was trying to warn you about. Ethan nudged the body with his boot. The infection had twisted its features beyond recognition, skin stretched tight, veins like blackened roots. Its fingers had elongated, almost claw-like. Lisa wiped her blade on her pants. So, they're getting stronger and faster now? Ramirez nodded. And if we don't leave by dawn, there will be more. Escape at first light. No one slept that night. They spent the remaining hours packing supplies, reinforcing weapons, and keeping watch. Sam was still weak, but he refused to be left behind. I'll keep up, he insisted. Promise. By sunrise, they were ready. Ramirez had a route planned, cutting through side streets and avoiding main roads where the undead clustered. It would be a grueling 15-mile trek, but if the bunker existed, it was their last shot at survival. Ethan glanced at his group. Tired, battered, but alive. He exhaled. Let's move. The city's graveyard. The streets were a wasteland. Burned-out cars. Rotting bodies. Silence, except for the occasional distant moan of the undead. They moved in a tight formation, Ethan in the lead, Ramirez and her people covering the rear. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every alley a trap. Lisa muttered, I hate this. Jonah gripped his shotgun. Then you'll really hate that. Ethan followed his gaze. A cluster of walkers ahead. Not a massive horde, but enough to be a problem. Rachel tensed. We can take them. No, Ramirez said. Too much noise. We go around. They cut through a narrow alley, moving carefully between broken dumpsters and collapsed buildings. Then Ethan heard it. A low growl. Not the groaning of normal walkers. Something else. Something watching. Faster, he whispered. They reached the end of the alley, only to find another roadblock of abandoned cars. Ramirez cursed. Climb over. Lisa hauled herself up first, scrambling over a truck's hood. Jonah helped Rachel over, then turned to Sam. Sam's face was pale. I got it. He pulled himself up, groaning as his wound strained. Then the growling grew louder. Ethan turned just in time to see movement in the shadows. A shape, fast, predatory. And then it charged. The pack arrives. It was another evolved infected. Not just one. 3. They sprinted from the ruins, moving in eerie coordination. Ethan fired, one went down, but the others kept coming. Lisa reached for Sam, yanking him over the truck just as the creatures leapt. Jonah fired his shotgun. Another infected fell, but the last one tackled Ramirez's soldier, tearing into his throat. Ramirez screamed. The soldier choked on blood. Ethan didn't think. He pulled his knife and drove it into the creature's skull. It collapsed, but the damage was done. The soldier was dead. Ramirez stood frozen. Then she clenched her jaw. We keep moving. She didn't look back. No turning back. They pressed on. The further they went, the more the city felt wrong. The undead weren't just shambling anymore. Some were moving differently, lurking in corners, waiting in silence instead of groaning. Watching. Ethan knew what that meant. The infection was spreading in ways they didn't understand. Lisa whispered, I don't like this. "You're not supposed to," Ethan muttered. Then, finally. A sign. A rusted road marker. Bunker facility 1.5 miles ahead. Relief flooded through them. "We're close," Ramirez said. "We." A distant howl cut through the air. "Not human. Not normal." Rachel whispered, "Tell me that's a dog." Jonah tightened his grip on his weapon. "That's not a dog." Ethan scanned the area. The sun was starting to set. Shadows stretched long. And then he saw them. Silhouettes. Moving across the rooftops. Not running. Not shambling. Hunting. Lisa's voice was quiet. "We need to run." Ethan exhaled. Yeah. The final stretch to the bunker wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be a war. The bunker was close, less than a mile. But the infected were closer. Silhouettes moved across the rooftops, tracking their every step. These weren't the slow, brain-dead walkers they'd spent months evading. These were hunters. And they were waiting. Ethan gritted his teeth. "We run. Now." Ramirez nodded. "Stay tight. Don't stop for anything." Then, the infected howled. The sound ripped through the air, unnatural and predatory. A signal. And suddenly, the rooftops exploded with movement. The race against death. Lisa was the first to break into a sprint, gripping her machete as she ran. Jonah and Rachel weren't far behind, with Sam stumbling but pushing himself forward. Ethan fired behind them, taking down one of the creatures mid-leap. Another lunged from the side, claws outstretched. Ramirez tackled it, driving her knife into its throat before rolling back to her feet. They ran through the abandoned streets, dodging wrecked cars and debris. The bunker's entrance had to be ahead. It had to be. "Left!" Ramirez shouted. Ethan turned sharply, nearly slipping on loose gravel. There, half buried in rubble, a concrete doorway with a rusted metal sign. Bunker 7, U.S. Military Facility. But the entrance was sealed. A massive steel door, locked tight. Jonah skidded to a stop. "You have got to be kidding me." Ramirez ran to the keypad next to the door, wiping dust from the display. She punched in a code. Nothing. "Damn it." Lisa spun around. "We don't have time for this." The infected were closing in. Some moved along the walls like insects, others leaping between buildings with unnatural speed. Ethan turned to Ramirez. "You got another way in?" Ramirez's hands flew over the keypad. "If I can override the lockdown." A screech erupted behind them. One of the hunters landed inches from Sam. He barely had time to react before it slammed into him, sending him crashing against the bunker wall. Lisa lunged forward, swinging her machete. The blade dug deep into the creature's shoulder, but it barely flinched. Jonah fired his shotgun. The blast blew half the infected's head off. It twitched, then collapsed. Sam groaned, struggling to his feet. Ethan turned back to Ramirez. "Open the damn door." Ramirez gritted her teeth, slamming her fist into the panel. The keypad beeped. Then. A hiss of decompression. With a groan of metal, the bunker door began to open. The last stand. Inside. "Now!" Ethan yelled. Rachel and Sam rushed in first. Lisa and Jonah followed, weapons still raised. Ramirez was next, but as Ethan turned to follow, a shadow fell over him. Another infected. This one was bigger. Stronger. It slammed into him, knocking him backward. His rifle skidded out of reach. Ethan grabbed his knife, stabbing upward. The blade sunk into the creature's chest, but it barely seemed to notice. It grinned, jagged, inhuman teeth bared. Lisa screamed, "Ethan!" Jonah fired, but the infected dodged, not mindlessly charging like the others, but calculating. It grabbed Ethan by the throat, squeezing. His vision blurred. Then Ramirez was there, slamming the butt of her rifle into the creature's head. It snarled. And Lisa finished it. Her machete sliced through its throat. Blackened blood sprayed. The infected collapsed, twitching, finally dead. Ramirez grabbed Ethan, dragging him inside the bunker as the door began to shut. The last thing Ethan saw before the heavy steel sealed them inside was dozens of the infected swarming toward them, their hollow eyes filled with hunger. Then, darkness. The unknown below. Silence filled the bunker. Only the sound of their heavy breathing echoed through the cold, metallic corridors. A dim emergency light flickered overhead. They were alive. Ethan coughed, rubbing his bruised throat. That was too close. Sam collapsed against the wall. Yeah, no kidding. Rachel looked around. Now what? Ramirez stepped forward, adjusting her rifle. Now, we see what's left. They turned deeper into the bunker. The walls were lined with military insignia. Crates of supplies, some untouched. A sign overhead read, Command Center, Level B2. Lisa exhaled. Looks like we got lucky. Jonah didn't look convinced. Or not. Ethan followed his gaze. Further down the hall, scratches lined the walls. Deep gouges. As if something had tried to get out. The realization sent a chill down his spine. They had escaped the horrors above. But something had been trapped down here. Waiting. And as the emergency lights flickered, a distant noise echoed through the bunker. A clicking sound. Not human. The battle wasn't over. It had just begun. The end.